back. And of course, lately the word socialism has been around a long time, but it's really been in the forefront, especially since the election of the new mayor in New York City. So very honored to have with us today Eric Eggers. He's the Vice President of Research at the Government Accountability Institute and co-host of its podcast, The Drilldown. He's the author of a book entitled Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election, and has appeared frequently in media analyzing election integrity, foreign policy, organized protest, and political corruption. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen there. And then the website is g-a-i.org, which stands for the Government Accountability Institute, g-a-i.org. Eric, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Perry, that was incredibly well done. There's a lot of information to get through, but you handled it like a pro.
Well, thank you. Good to see you. Where are you? Where are we Skyping you in from?
So I'm actually in Tallahassee, Florida. So the capital of the free state of Florida, the place that has benefited the most dramatically from the rise in socialism in New York City. As the election results came in last week, I could feel my property values going up by the second.
I was going to say, it's good to be in real estate down there. All right, a lot to talk about. Socialism. What's your take of that election in New York by Mamdani?
Yeah, there's a couple different things happening there, Perry. I think on the one hand, you know, if you import communists, as Stephen Miller said, you're going to elect communists. And I think it's worth noting that Zoran Mamdani won a majority of foreign-born voters in New York City. These are people for whom perhaps the concept of socialism is not altogether, if you'll pardon the pun, foreign. This is something that maybe they are used to seeing. They might not even think it's anathema to the way things should be run. Unfortunately, people in the United States of America know differently, but not enough of them showed up to reject that idea. So is there this upswell of an embrace of Democrat socialism within the party? Perhaps. But I also think in New York City specifically, it's a local thing. Zoran Mamdani campaigned as an energetic person. He said he was going to help try to solve the problems that New York City residents are facing, specifically how expensive things are. He made a lot of videos. He talked about freezing rent. He talked about making bus free, childcare free. So he's trying to make things more affordable, and you can understand why that's appealing to people in the city of New York, because it's the most expensive city in the country by some metrics. So I'm not sure how much of what happened last week is an embrace of socialism and how much of it is actually a reflection of how poorly New York City has been run, also by Democrats for the last several decades.
All right, the next question troubles me personally, so I'd like to get your take on it. Is it really socialism that he's forwarding, or is it radical Islamic theology?
Yeah, you're all right, I think, to be troubled by that. You know, Perry, I've been working here with Peter Schweizer at the Government Accountability Institute since 2012. And back when I first started working, we met with a member of Congress who was newly elected. This is part of like the Tea Party wave. And he sat down, he's going to talk to us about how things get done in Congress. But he goes, but before we talk, let me ask you, are you troubled about the way this country is headed towards socialism? And this was at a time when Barack Obama was, you know, bailing out General Motors and doing things that people thought was, this is a growth in the function of government that seems like a socialist kind of bent. But what I think you're now seeing is something that's more troubling for exactly the cultural connotations that you reference. You know, unfortunately, we've seen what happens in cities like London. And more close to home, we've seen what happens in cities like Dearborn, Michigan. And you've got reporting recently that Zoran Mamdani is tied to some of the same funding networks that pushed the mayor of Dearborn and helped him become elected. And he has said, look, I'm Islamic and I'm a Muslim. And he has embraced some of those cultural ties. Unfortunately, you know, he was supported by people who are connected to the first World Trade Center bombing and other incidents of domestic terrorism that I think most people would be shocked that New York City would embrace. So it is quite troubling, and I do think that, you know, that's one of the reasons why people are very concerned. I do think Republicans hope to make Zoran Mamdani the face of the Democrat Party for the 2026 midterms because they think it will be good politically. New York City may have embraced this man, but they do not believe most of the country will.
It's just kind of mind-boggling that New York would vote for a guy who is tagged as a socialist when it's the socialist policies that's made the town unaffordable.
Well, you're absolutely right. But remember this, Perry. I mean, elections are about choices. And so it's the socialist policies that have made it bad. But who were they going to choose from? The most prominent alternative was Andrew Cuomo, the scandal-plagued, disgraced, removed former governor of the state. So when Zoran Mamdani is having to defend tweets he made about the police in 2020, Cuomo was having to defend the fact that he murdered their grandmas because he sent them to die in these nursing homes during COVID. So it was really a choice between terrible alternatives, and in the minds of some New Yorkers, the least terrible alternative won.
Do you know, Eric, does Mamdani have the power to do all the things? Does a position of mayor give him the power to do all the things he wants to do?
Well, you don't have to ask me about that. You can ask the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, who's already come out and said, no, he does not. And so I think, there's the mess around and find out part of this. And New York City residents are about to find out that much of what Mamdani promised, he is incapable of delivering on unilaterally. It will require support from the New York State Assembly. It will require support from the governor. Part of what he wanted to do to pay for his socialist plans was to raise the corporate income tax 2% to be on par with New Jersey. And I think he wanted to raise personal income taxes on the wealthiest residents of New York City. And the governor has said that she's not going to support that particular initiative, even though she endorsed him for mayor. Ironically, Perry, it's worth pointing out, Mamdani has not endorsed her for governor. So no, the short answer to your question is he does not have the power to do that, but he can do some things on the local level. And so it'd be interesting to see, kind of where that tension plays out.
All right, I want to go to the heart of your book. Let me just ask you a 30,000-foot question. How corrupt is our government?
How much time do you have, Perry?
Well, the reason I bring that up, Eric, we were all pretty good, pretty happy when Doge was doing its thing, and then it stopped, and we don't know, was any of that carried out? And all of a sudden it pulled the covers off everything we suspected, but it seems like now it's just gone away. What's your take?
Well, thank you for asking. And let me just tell you this. So, you did a great job of listing off our organizational website. The podcast I do with Peter Schweizer is called The Drilldown, and you can listen to every episode we do at thedrilldown.com. And this is something we spend a significant amount of time discussing. In fact, the last episode we talked to somebody who's an expert in the SNAP and food stamp fraud department. And he said that one benefit of this program being frozen is actually they're able to kind of take a look under the hood and identify some of the more egregious examples of the fraud and waste that's happening within this program that's meant to feed needy and hungry families. And they're finding people that are registered for food stamps in 6 different states. Some people have cards that are carrying balances of over $60,000, which of course they can then turn around and sell for some amount of cash on the black market. So this is an example of a program that's been exploited with a significant error rate. The federal government is taking some measures to try to make it much more reputable. And they're going to make states that have high error rates, like California, have to foot the bill themselves and not rely on Uncle Sam and federal tax dollars. Like, I'm in Florida, I shouldn't be having to pay for California's error-riddled system. So that's one example of how much fraud exists. But to your point, Perry, the incentives, and this is what we spend a lot of time discussing at my organization, the incentives aren't great to fix it. So let's just take the food stamp conversation for a second. Yeah, it makes sense that we should try to get rid of the fraud and abuse in food stamps. That's big business to big businesses. Like Walmart would stand to lose $2 billion, I think I saw, in the month of November alone if they couldn't restore the funding of that program. Coca-Cola has said their worldwide sales would drop 2.5% if people couldn't buy soda with food stamps. I mean, it's significant. So what we always try to do is highlight, hey, here's something everyone says is wrong. How come more people aren't trying to fix it? And the answer usually is because people are making money off of the corrupt and broken status quo.
All right, let me take a quick break here. A couple of things there. Thedrilldown.com. Check out the podcast. Check out Eric's book called Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. There's a picture of the cover of the book. We'll get into that a little bit more. Check out the website, g-a-i.org. That stands for the Government Accountability Institute. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and such an honor to have with us today Eric Edgars. He's the Vice President of Research there at the Government's Accountability Institute. He's also the host of its podcast, The Drilldown. You can go to thedrilldown.com. And the author of a fascinating book called Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. He's appeared frequently on a lot of media outlets. He also deals with election integrity, foreign policy, organized protest, and political corruption. There's a lot to cover in that book. So, Eric, tell us about the left's plans to steal the election and election integrity. Where do we stand with that in America today?
Well, I'll tell you, Perry, we're in much better shape today than we were when that book came out, which was in 2018. So if you can imagine, I wrote that book called How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election before the 2020 election. Now, obviously, I couldn't anticipate what happened during the COVID era and the fact that we would send the most ballots ever in the least secure way ever, and then be lied to and told that it was the most fair and secure election ever, because my book spends a lot of time proving exactly the opposite. We spend a lot of time getting into the number of illegal immigrants that potentially can cast ballots, how vulnerable mail-in balloting can be, talk about how states like California participate in ballot harvesting, and of course that practice became much more mainstream and widespread in 2020 election, so much so that people said, hey, this was kind of bonkers. Let's dial some of this stuff back. But the left was so engaged and saw how successful it was that they lost their mind. So a state like Georgia says, listen, we're pretty sure 2020 wasn't okay. So we want to put in some basic common sense reforms. We don't want people standing next to people when they're casting ballots. And then they lost their mind. You might remember, Perry, they made Major League Baseball move their All-Star game in 2021 because they're like, we can't have this. So the left seems very committed to wanting to continue to cast elections the way we did in 2020. But thanks to Donald Trump, who understands firsthand the very real consequences that can happen when you don't take election integrity seriously, we've had Harmeet Dillon with the Attorney General's office on our podcast, and she's actually sued states to collect voter rolls. And in taking a look at voter rolls, I think they're trying to figure out who shouldn't be on there. You know, one of the studies that we did before that book came out looked at 37 states worth of voter rolls, and we found over 2,000 people in my home state of Florida that cast ballots in 2 different states. So, I mean, that right there was more than 4 times the margin of a presidential election from earlier this century. So we know, unfortunately, voter fraud exists, and I think that we have a real ally in the fight for election integrity with the Trump administration.
So can the feds tell a Secretary of State in a state to clean up their voter rolls or inspect them themselves? Can the feds step in over the state and take a look at it?
Well, Perry, let me ask you this question. What do you think Gavin Newsom's response was when Harmeet Dillon said, hey, California, we'd love to look at your voter rolls? Do you think they said, oh, absolutely, take a look at them, here they are? Or do you think they said, hey, our attorney's online too? Unfortunately, it was the latter. And so what the states can do is leverage the fact that they give them money. So the states are aggressive and I think tactically intelligent about leveraging federal money support to get the states to comply with, at the very least, turning it over. Now, you talked about the Doge analysis. I do believe that the federal government's very invested in doing a very detailed level look to just make sure that the names on these voter rolls match actual legal residents. States like California have really struggled with that. So between that and encouraging states to require voter ID, I think those are very 2 common sense election integrity reforms that most Americans support.
But wouldn't the feds have some kind of authority during a federal election?
Well, one of the things that is supposed to keep our elections the safest is the fact that they're decentralized. So, you hear the idea that these states are laboratories of democracy. So each state is, in theory, in charge of conducting its own election. And in fact, even at the local level, each county is in charge of conducting those elections, and they have to get those results certified by the state. So the federal government is limited in terms of what they're able to actually mandate, even during presidential or federal elections. But again, that's where they can use the incentives of finances to encourage states to have, listen, we have concerns, and we're going to take a hard look at these voter rolls. I believe that's where things have to start. If you have time, Perry, just as a quick anecdote, in my book, I tell the story how easy fraudulent voter rolls are exploited. New York City, ironically enough, sent detectives undercover to try to cast ballots on behalf of people who should not be on voter rolls. They identified 63 names that shouldn't be there. and they sent undercover detectives to try to cast ballots on behalf of those 63 names. They were successful 61 of the times. So unfortunately, when names aren't on the voter rolls, they can be easily exploited, and that's one of the major problems in elections.
So when you look back at this last election and the president wins not only the popular vote, but obviously the other vote, but he wins the popular vote against all the odds of voter fraud. That ought to tell you something, don't you think?
Well, not only that, but remember, the Biden administration, one of the first things they did when they took over was issue this executive order in which they basically said, we're going to leverage and weaponize every agency in the federal government to register people to vote. And as we detailed on a number of investigations and in some podcast episodes, that means when people go to register for food stamps or register for housing assistance, then they are also encouraged to register to vote. The Biden administration really tried to kind of target the lower quartile of people who are going to be more inclined to engage in government services, because they understand that suggests like disproportion. Those people are inclined to vote for Democrats who favor expanding those services. So that's one of the things that the Biden administration tried to do. They also, I think, did not support election integrity efforts. In fact, I'm sure you've seen the map, Perry. Some of the states that Kamala Harris won, every state that does not require voter ID voted for the Democrat.
Yeah. Coming back to a little bit of Doge, there's this attempt now to get rid of the Department of Education. Quite a few presidents have talked about it, but this president has got it down pretty thin. Do you think it completely goes away?
So we actually had somebody on our podcast, a guy named Richard Corcoran, who's the president of a university here in the state of Florida, and he's the former commissioner of education for the state of Florida under Ron DeSantis. And he suggested that eliminating the Department of Education is actually not a great idea. And here's why. Because one of the jobs of the Department of Education at the federal level is to dole out money. And they can say, listen, if you're doing something we don't like, we will withhold the significant amount of federal money that goes to the states. And so if you get rid of the federal Department of Education, which again operates primarily as a pass-through for money, then you give more power to states like California, like Illinois, for whom they have incredibly powerful teachers unions. And by the way, they support educational policies that I think most Americans, certainly most of your viewers, would not support. So if you completely eliminated the federal Department of Education, you actually just embolden and strengthen state-level departments of education like California, like Illinois, and teachers unions who work every day to do the opposite of the people who send those tax dollars to Washington would support. So don't know it's a great idea. I do believe the Trump administration is being smart about leveraging the money and trying to use, again, the power of the purse to encourage behaviors and incentivize the right things, incentivize actual learning in the states, and not SEL-driven nonsense.
But that could flip. I mean, you can get a Democratic administration and they just give money away like crazy to advance their social causes through education.
Yeah, welcome to the Biden administration, and welcome to the Obama administration.
Okay.
They did exactly that. However, I mean, the point is they still fund the states that are doing things. So, I mean, the money's going to get there, and so that's the natural kind of interplay that's part of the way our system is set up.
Switch your thinking over to the whole tariff issue. You know, it's before the Supreme Court. What's your take on that? Do you think he wins, or is there going to be some kind of a compromise? Where do you think that's going?
Harry, you're hitting me with this political potpourri, buddy. No, I think I'm happy to address it. I think that the Trump administration seems to have a good track record with this current Supreme Court of making arguments that most justices find to be compelling, or at least certainly in compliance with the law, despite what you hear from most mainstream media outlets. So, it's very interesting, but obviously the idea of a tariff is not foreign to the history of the United States. This is something we've done before. And I think the most kind of interesting dynamic of the arguments I've heard so far is that the people who are opposing the tariffs recognize there's not a good or clever or kind of clean or accurate way of refunding the money. So there doesn't appear to be a functional remedy that they might be able to pursue. They seem like they're protesting just because it's something that Donald Trump supports, and so they don't want to support something that is on behalf of someone whom they personally and politically oppose. But yeah, I guess I'm optimistic that this economic policy was well-reasoned and vetted by the lawyers within the Trump administration, who I do believe to be good at their jobs.
All right, sticking with the potpourri, 8 Dems crossed the aisle and want to open up the government. That's a bad day for Schumer. What do you think?
No, it's absolutely a bad day for Schumer. I think it's a good day for America, though. And, this is something we also addressed. I think, ironically, the incentives were in place for both sides to perpetuate the shutdown. I mean, the Republicans, to your point, like they felt like they're making progress in right-sizing the government under Doge. And then when that went away, they kind of lost out on the opportunity to continue to do that. This shutdown was saving the country money because we're not funding certain things. And I do, as Brooke Rollins has said, look, this is a chance for us to get eyes under the hood of this kind of broken and corrupt system. So I think the Republicans and the Trump administration said, look, we're okay with this because we'd actually like to get rid of and downsize a number of people at the federal level. And maybe the fact that it's not working at all is a good indication of just how many of these services we can do without. And then on the Democrat side, they seem to be content because by not supporting and not caving for reopening the government, it appears that they are playing to their constituents and looking like they're fighting the Trump administration, something that Democrat voters say they're looking for their leaders to do. So I think ultimately what happened is when you start seeing planes and flights rescheduled and canceled, and you start to hear from people for whom the needed public assistance is not showing up, enough people said, look, this has gone on long enough. And at the end of the day, the Democrats were not being honest. The Republicans offered a clean continuing resolution. They fought and won that battle with the one big beautiful bill. Just because the Democrats don't like it doesn't mean they get to use the shutdown to relitigate an issue that the Republicans previously won on. Enough Democrats came to their senses and are finally admitting that, which is why they're supporting the reopening of the government.
You're fascinating, Eric. Before I run out of time, one more quick question. Will we ever have a balanced budget again?
No chance, Perry. I hate to tell you that. I wish, in the state of Florida, we actually have a constitutional amendment that requires us to have a balanced budget each year. And that's one of the reasons why, so many people are moving to the state of Florida. I think Ron DeSantis is being viewed as a presidential candidate. And actually our Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins is being viewed as a natural successor because the state of Florida is incredibly well run. However, the federal level, unfortunately, does not have that incentive. It does not have that carrot or stick, which is why it's been 30 years since we've had one.
You're fascinating. We'll get you back. Let me check out, or tell our viewers to check out The Drill Down. That's the podcast, thedrilldown.com. Check that out. Check out Eric's book called Fraud. You can catch that online. And the website is g-a-i.org, and it stands for the Government Accountability Institute. And there's a picture of the landing page. Thank you, Eric. You're fascinating. Let's stay connected.
Harry, you're the best. Thanks to you and your audience. Have a great day.
You too.